Morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Great, great, okay. So for the next 20 minutes, what we'll be talking about is how to be distinctive everywhere. In today's marketing context, how can you be the best version of yourself as a brand? And I guess who better to share the stage with than the Coca-Cola company, who pretty much wrote the playbook on distinctive branding.
Yeah, so speaking about distinctiveness, I believe that Coca-Cola really started the trend. So when we think about the iconic contour bottle, the brief was, make sure it's recognizable in the dark or shattered on the ground. And I would argue that no one here needs to be told what this picture is.
So yes, so I guess as partners of Coca-Cola, and being fortunate to work on global brands like Fanta, like Minute Maid, like Coca-Cola, like M&M's, like Stella, like Budweiser, like Burger King, we pride ourselves in the belief that the brands should be the best version of themselves. And we were founded on that belief and philosophy, and stole with pride from this quote from Oscar Wilde: "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." Because in the context of branding, it's so important to be true to the essence of the idea that drives your brand, and make sure that the way you present yourself in identity and experience lives up to that promise. And really, why are we talking about it now? I guess not all of the forces in the world today are in our favor. You know, the digitization of logos, especially in fashion, where legibility and acceptability to digital channels has stripped away decades, and in some instances centuries, of character. And the way that Alex Murrell in his blog, The Age of Average, talked about it, is that we're all locked in this algorithmic world. These are 8 images from 8 different countries of 8 different Airbnbs, all just trying to stand out from the crowd, and all ironically fitting in. These are 8 different, independent, artisanal coffee shops trying to kick against the chains. And instead of kicking against the system, they've created a new system of fitting in. And it's the branding equivalent and the cultural equivalent of what happened to car design in the 90s, when the wind tunnel took away the distinctive characteristics in pursuit of performance, in pursuit of efficiency and ergonomics. And as a result, things started to look quite the same. And that is happening in branding, where, you know, the rules of the game and how you should present yourself in order to be efficient and effective are at the expense of standing out from the crowd. The world doesn't need another D2C toothbrush held in the right hand of a model on a pink background. And we don't need any more shelfies that are all desperately trying to be individualistic and are cut above the rest when in fact they become the rest. And it's fair to say that we feel that our industry is facing a crisis of identity in the fact that norms and the expected override sometimes the unexpected. The best example that we've seen in this week is that brilliant, distinctive and disruptive fear ad that landed in culture, truly breaking every norm and being distinctive and setting itself apart. And it's not just theory or opinion, it's the stats that back this up. Whether it's online ads, whether it's online content where you've shown people work and you haven't shown them it and asked them, have you seen a brand? Or if it's in TV advertising, the percentage of people who correctly recognize the brand is worryingly poor. So we believe, rather simply, that brands need to organize, orchestrate, and grasp the power of their distinctive brand assets in pursuit of a distinctive experience. Just before lockdown, Ipsos, if you haven't read it, I can highly recommend it, published The Power of You. 2,000 pieces of US video content, and they went into it and looked at the most effective content, what is in it. And lo and behold, the most effective of the most effective, orchestrated and used distinctive assets, which is far more effective than just simply showing and talking about the brand. So on the back of that, JKR and Ipsos collaborated on a major study to go beyond just film content, to look at assets in the wild, and to understand how distinctive are distinctive brand assets for global leading brands. So it was a big study, 26,000 people. They opened the database of their distinctive brand asset tests to understand across 5,000 assets, 500 brands, 33 countries, 26 categories, how many of these brands' assets are truly distinctive. The slogans, the icons, the logos, the colors, the characters, and the products. And worryingly, to get to gold status, you need to be immediately recognized, intuitively, and also uniquely attributed. The worrying fact is that of all those assets, only 15% are truly distinctive. That gives us a lot of work to go at. So what we wanted to talk about today, I will give you a QR code. You can read that if you've not read it already. We're not going to go into the report. We're going to go behind the scenes and understand what does it take to be one of the 15 and not one of the 85. So we're going to give you 3 lessons. I'm going to back it up with some great Coca-Cola company examples to go. So the first one, before you start tackling your brand icons and your brand assets, be really clear about who you are as a brand. Understand what it is that drives your brand to behave in a distinctive way. Not just show up and communicate, but act in a distinctive way. So the B for us is brand strategy that really unlocks how your brand can behave. And the reason we think behavior and action is so important is because it was the foundation of some of the greatest brands in the world. They didn't position themselves for communication. They positioned themselves to give people things they could respond to. And as Disney put it better than everyone else, we make our mind up what the brand is based on the thousands of gestures that the brand makes. So to be able to act is fundamental to that experience. And Nike are probably the best example of a comms-based creative brand driven by communications. But even they acknowledge now they have to go beyond the say and the show and the do. And so the more that they can build and own the experience and the sales funnel, the more successful and the more distinctive they've become. So we think of this as an idea that is behavioral, an idea that allows brands to behave, act, and be true to themselves in the real world, born of a distinctive thought that's true to them, and expressed in a kind of simple and understandable way that can only be for that brand. And it can empower the brand to not just show up distinctively, but also to act distinctively.
So no matter where Coke shows up in the world, it's always about happiness, upliftment, and togetherness. And it's because we are so laser focused on our brand idea and how our brand looks in the world that we will never be mistaken for something else, and more importantly, we will never be forgotten. It's because of these 2 principles, the idea of being distinctive and sustained, that we have that laser focus. So recently, we were doing a refresh for Fanta, and it was about the idea of getting all ages to play. The big idea was a pop of Fanta. Now, playfulness is nothing new for Fanta. It's been in our brand DNA forever. But what we've been able to do is take the distinctive idea, the distinctive behavior of playfulness, but bring it into irrelevance for now. So using playfully disruptive, intentionally anti-precious. So really making sure we keep our heritage, but bring it into a timely relevance. When we work within a fixed and flexible model, we're focusing on those distinctive assets, our iconic assets in the middle. These are the things that will never change. They will always show up the same way everywhere. But as we go out into the flexible elements, that's where we have a bit more opportunity to play and become more relevant for our audience.
So as you see there, it's not just about an elevation or a modernization of and making more distinctive the assets. It's all corralled around a thought that can be ownable and true to that brand, and then elevating all the assets to work within a system. So the behavioral thought, the B, is critical as the first step. The second point is how we think of identity in the context of experience and not as a separate mindset. So this idea of distinctiveness is yes to stand out in a visual or a sonic or a verbal form, but it's in service of a distinctive experience. Because more and more now, especially in CPG, that interplay and the number of touch points that have to be considered And the fact that nearly every journey may be unique and every touch point might be viable, you have to think about the system. And so it's not just about matching your sellable product with your communication. It's about the whole system working in harmony that can work even if the logo potentially isn't even in play. And we know that because that experience and that connected experience can, in some instances, be more powerful than just communication alone. So being able to harness and organize the brand as a system of assets rather than just a few pieces of key brand assets is critical. And the way that we think about that is this kind of continuous flywheel of linking how you show up, the consistency and the distinctiveness of your brand with the way you behave and what you do. So always thinking of the suite of assets and the identity kit in the context of an experience. Because as you can see on the right, that identity kit is pretty exhaustive these days. It goes beyond just the assets. It can be the behavior, the spatial principles, the 3D principles, assets for CGI, assets for the virtual world. How do you bring all those to life in the context of the journey the consumer is going to experience so that we don't end up with a kind of set of parts that don't actually relate to the consumer's expectations and the need of the journey?
So building on this brand experience, at Coca-Cola, we understand the importance of this. And again, it's something we've been doing for a really long time, 137 years to be exact. So from the beginning, it wasn't about just the drink. It was about the whole experience. It was about the spoon, the glass, the perfect serve, and making sure that everyone who enjoyed a Coca-Cola had a brand experience around it. We now take that to the next level, and going back to our Fanta case study, when we think about the whole consumer journey, it's about making sure that we're showing up in relevant ways and timely ways across the whole experience. So it's kind of like your favorite book or a really good song. You want it to ebb and flow. You don't want it to be shouting at you all the time, and you don't want it to be subtle all the time. So you really want to look at the whole experience and figure out ways that your brand is showing up in a relevant way for that audience at that moment. So next we're going to look at a little bit of a video that shows how we're bringing Fanta to life. I think.
Have you or someone you know suffered from this world is boringitis? Now more than ever before, this world is becoming more boring. And it can be a real big bummer. Many people are looking for a way to inject some color to fight back. May we suggest adding a pop of Fanta to your day? For the first time ever, Fanta has a truly global identity, featuring a logo that pops and fizzes, with a blue plucked from our past, colors that scream indulgence, bursting with flavor cues, electrifying taste buds, a typeface that's playful with a pop, illustration that moves and pops and pops and pops, photo and film that celebrates your true self. Don't suffer from this world's boringitis. Throw on orange-colored glasses and kiss boring goodbye. A playfully disruptive world with endless range. Head to any place Fanta is sold and pick one up in the name of play.
So as you can see, making sure that that brand cannot be mistaken for anyone else at any touch point, and making sure the experience is as distinctive as humanly possible. So an idea that allows your brand to behave and to act, making sure identity is in the context of experience. And the third point, I think, is critical, which is how do you get your brand out into the world in its most efficient, effective, and distinctive way. So really, this is all about the everywhere. So, you know, how do you use the technological platforms that we've got today and the internal muscle of all the people who touch your brand to make sure it gets out in its most distinctive way? And the challenge we face in this kind of visual economy, as Canva coined it, is that we don't feel equipped to be able to get these brands out as they were intended. So 1,600 of the world's leading marketing professionals said they don't have the tools to get our brands out in its most visually correct way. And as a result, what you find is a lot of it's not as it should be aesthetically, and it certainly isn't consistent. And the reality is that the PDF is not the answer. We've all got them, no one uses them, and they become the most expensive paperweight you'll ever buy. And I think the most important thing here is understanding before you deploy a brand, who is going to use it and how are they going to use it. So what we do at JKR is think about the principles and the approach to getting a brand into the world in the most distinctive way, ensuring that the people who are going to do that work know and understand and are equipped to do that. They have the right tools, they have the right guidance, and the right ability and capability to get them out there, and that they're there in service of the intended experience. So by that, what we mean is that it's not just about the end consumer. Think about the users that are going to use your brand. Have you mapped them? Do you know what they need? Do you know what they are using? What are you doing to help them get engaged? How are you prototyping with them? How are you engaging rather than giving them the answer? And when you're there, how do you give them the tools, the guidance, the ability? Are you auditing how well this brand is getting into the marketplace? Are you thinking about refinement, or do you feel that your system is complete when you hand it over to those who use it? Or are you always in beta? Have you got the right tech partners? Examples being people like Frontify and Canva. There are many others. How do you technologically support those businesses and those teams to get the brands out? And then it's all in service of two things. Can you actually apply this thing, and can you activate against it? And that's really where we try and support and help our clients to make sure that the brand gets out as it's intended. And I'll hand over now, and we'll talk about how Coke go about doing that.
So we have our amazing distinctive brand assets, and you might be wondering, how does a global system like Coca-Cola turn it into amazing brand experiences? So we have two things, KO Assets and Studio X. KO Assets is our asset management system, and it's probably the third or fourth iteration of it since I've been with the company, because we're always constantly improving, constantly figuring out ways to make it easier to find our stuff, because the last thing we want is for someone to put a deck together and Google our logo. So that's one thing. The other is Studio X, and Studio X is part of our new partnership with WPP, and they are our implementation arm. So the point of Studio X is that they're going to be hubs all over the globe, and their job is to take the amazing brand assets that we're developing and make sure that they're not only distinctive and consistent, but also that they're relevant for each of the markets. Because obviously Coca-Cola is going to show up slightly differently in Guatemala versus Germany. So it's their job to make sure that we're showing up in the right way in every market. Another case study, so we recently did a refresh with Minute Maid, and this is the Minute Maid that we had about 10 years ago. And again, going back to that idea of distinctiveness, it was important for us to not kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. We really wanted to keep the heritage of Minute Maid, but it needed a refresh. It needed to feel relevant for today's market. So we gave it a bit more pop of color, a bit more exciting typography. And again, when we were putting this out and making sure we were getting to brand experiences that look like this, we did not yet have Studio X in place. And I will say it was a bit of a nightmare. So we're very excited to see what our partnership with Studio X is going to be like, and that it's truly going to make our lives a lot easier. And then right after this, we're going to show a little video of, again, what we've been doing with Minute Maid.
So that's a wrap from us. So I guess in a world where distinctiveness is not as common as you'd think, our view is that the way to get to that 15%, be distinctive everywhere. An idea that drives behavior, identity in the context of experience, and get it out in its best form. If you want to know more, get your phones out. The report's on this QR code. Lots of tips and tricks to make your brand as distinctive as possible. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Massive thank you to Lee and Rebecca.